No bike is perfect, and this bike is no exception. There are 5, well actually 6 things that I absolutely hate. It is incredibly irritating, or I have just had to give up and just deal with it. So what are those? Let's take a look. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. As I mentioned in the intro, there are some things about this bike that I really hate. There's a few things that are incredibly irritating and some things that I've just had to compromise and deal with. And it's really important to understand that no bike is perfect. And I'm talking to you, Tenere owners. No bike is perfect. Every bike has issues. There's either things that you can modify to make it better or fix whatever those issues are, or you just have to accept the bike the way it is because everything else about it is amazing. And that's where I'm at on this bike. I am just short, like 80 miles short of 15,000 miles in the year that I have ridden this bike. I think I know it pretty well. I have taken it all over the place, both a lot of road, touring travel, a lot of off-road. So I know this bike, and there are things that have just came up that have really bothered me. So the first thing that was an issue, or has been an issue, that when I learned about this, when this bike first came out, it was a deterrent for me to even consider purchasing it. And I have seen comments from other riders out there that said they would not buy this bike because of this issue. Now, what is that issue? This is a service reminder light. Something as insignificant as a service reminder light prevented me from ever looking at this bike, and has also prevented others. Now, I realize that that is such a silly thing, but it is irritating, frustrating, and something I hate that I can't reset the service light myself. It's not something I can hook up an OBD2 link to. I can't go through the menu and do it. I have to take it to the dealership. Now, mine right now has that service light reset, and all it is this little tiny wrench that shows up in the corner. It's orange. Once you've exceeded the 6,000 miles between service intervals, it's gonna pop up. I got mine reset when I had the valve clearances done by the dealership, that initial one, and eventually the service light's gonna come back on again. But I eventually grew to just ignore it, because the way I look at it, and I'll put it into context, I know that 98% of my viewers are men. Let's think about it in this way. You have met a woman that you absolutely love and has everything that you want, except she's a blonde and not a brunette. Would you not date her because of hair color? I kind of feel like that's the same as this. It is such a trivial thing to make such a big deal about. So it is something I hate. I am overlooking it. It is not a big deal. I've moved on. The number 2 thing that really, really irritates me, and I've never had a bike that does this to me, when I do long distance travel, if I know I'm gonna be out for really long periods of time, traveling extensive distances greater than 1,000 miles, I like to track that mileage, and I do it through the Trip B on this bike. And what I have discovered is that when Trip B gets to 999 miles, it rolls to 0, and it will hold 0 until I go from A to B and start viewing it. Once I start viewing B, then it'll start clocking again, and I can switch back to A. That is a huge irritation for me. I like to have my bike on Trip A, so that I'm watching how many miles I have on each tank of gas, and Trip B should just be clocking, and so I know how long I've been out on a trip. So with that reset, it really frustrates me, because I have to keep track of where I'm gonna be when I'm rolling over that 1,000 to make sure I flip over to Trip B. Now, that might not be a big deal for you if you don't really care how many miles you're out. My engineering brain refuses to allow me to discount numbers, so I'm very focused on the numbers. So that is something that I have not experienced on any other bike I have ridden except this one. It is a huge irritation to me. but something I've had to figure out a workaround in order to get it to do what I want it to. All right, this is irritation number 3. It's not a huge deal. It is just more of a, I think it's a me thing than it is anything else. And that is the font size for the clock and the temperature is really small. I wear prescription glasses, prescription sunglasses, and the changing from looking at distance down, I can't just glance at the clock or the temperature to know where that's at. Again, like I said, I'm all about numbers, and I like to know what time it is to know when I should expect to arrive somewhere, or where that's going to be, or how much longer I have to go. The font size is incredibly small. The BA Racer on this has a bigger font than the temperature and clock, and there is plenty of room on that side of the TFT for that to show up. So that is an issue for me. It is an irritation. Again, doesn't change the functionality of the bike at all or how awesome it is to ride, but I really cannot stand how small that is. I think that Aprilia could have done a better job in having larger font on that. Now, I want to make one other comment too that many of you may not even know exists, and that is when you are riding in temperatures at 99 degrees, when it rolls to 100, it shows 0, 0. And it will not show that 1 until it goes to 101. So once you hit 101 and up, then it'll start clocking it. But 99, 0, 0, then 101. So many of you may not even know that. I lack good judgment, so I see it all the time. Just one of those things. I think this is issue number 4. This one is actually a little bit more serious and less tongue-in-cheek, and not so much an irritation, but something to be incredibly concerned about if you have a bad crash or fall. And that is the pivot bolts on both the brake lever and the shifting lever. These pivot bolts, I think because this is a cast alloy and it may be exposed a little bit more, are known to break. And I have a titanium one right here, so it breaks basically right there where it necks down. So that's a very small threaded area. One of the fixes for this is to replace the steel bolt with the titanium one. However, I have spoken to someone who had the titanium one in there, and their brake lever broke that titanium one off. And what ended up happening is when they took it into the dealership, the dealer had to order a special drill bit in order to drill the titanium threads that were left in there in order to use an easy out to get this out. And that took a long time to get that done, and it is a problem. Now, I have taken the titanium one out of the brake side and put the steel one back in. It's a lot easier to get a steel one removed than it is to get the titanium, now that I've learned that. But on my shift lever, I've left the titanium in there. And that is because I replaced the alloy lever with a steel one, so the steel has a chance to bend, and it's also a folding lever as well, so that hopefully it's a little bit more protective. Now, on the brake side, there are steel lever options. They're not cheap. The one I was looking at was about $125, and from what I could tell, it's still not a folding lever at the brake pedal, the pad itself. But at least being steel, it has the ability to bend as opposed to break at this pivot. So that is a bit of it is an irritation, it is a concern. The next thing that really became an irritation for me and I had to do something about was the mirrors. Now, initially I thought that the way the mirrors were designed was going to be awesome because it's a compression fitting down in here. Those mirrors are gone. Obviously I have some replacements, but that compression fitting, the first time that mirror gets banged and swiveled around, I could not get that compression fitting to hold it again. And what would end up happening is initially when I was just trying to tighten the compression fitting down, I'd be running down the road and my mirrors are just going back and forth. Now, they got banged into, riding off road, hitting branches, just trying to squeeze around. I don't know all the reasons. The bike never went to the ground and smashed the mirrors, so they eventually loosened up. jammed some zip tie down in the compression fitting, and then the mirror was still sitting out a little bit. Became a huge problem. So I ended up having to change them. I really didn't have a choice. So what initially I thought was going to be awesome, having the compression fitting, ended up being a huge pain in the ass and resulted in me having to replace the mirrors. All right, this is issue number 6, and it became a problem last year, and that is the daytime running light. This light, as cool as it looks, and I really like how this looks with just the lines and everything, it does nothing for visibility, zero. And last year I ran off the road, like completely off the road, about 6 times, and another 6 times or so I had cars just coming up right in my face and pulling over at the last minute. And I can't help but think part of that is they couldn't see me, especially on really hot days. And I was riding in some extremely hot weather last year where the heat waves are coming off of the road. I think I just disappeared, and this was not helping me. So I have had to go to running the high beam, which the bike's not running, so the high beam won't come on. And then I have also added auxiliary lights. So as awesome as this is, don't rely on this. That's why I think this is an irritation and a problem. If you're riding it during the daytime, I ride with my brights all the time. I have a few people that flash me. I don't care. I would rather be seen and have them flash their lights at me because I'm on high beams than not be seen. So this, as cool as it looks, it's not functional. So don't rely on that. And that is, it's an irritation, something I had to overcome. I'm guessing that some of you are expecting me to talk about 2 other things with this particular bike. And one of those is the heat off the catalytic converter on your right foot. I personally don't find it to be a problem. I think the most noticeable temperature range that I find it is when the ambient temperature is between 75 and 85 degrees. That's when I notice a little extra heat on my right foot over my left. When it's colder than that, I don't really notice it because it's a little bit extra heat, makes it a little bit more comfortable. When it's over 85, approaching 90, it is already incredibly hot from the ambient temperature that I don't notice it. And I think because I replaced the stock exhaust muffler with the Dominator, I get a little bit more exhaust flow, so maybe that reduces the temperature there. I don't have a temperature gauge that can go up that high in order to check the temperatures there. So I don't really find that to be an issue. My Tenere 700 has cooked my right foot more than this ever has, riding in high temperatures. So to me, not a big deal. I think that is an exaggerated issue with this bike, just my opinion based on my experience. And the other thing that you may have been expecting me to talk about is the misassembly or the wrong assembly of the front forks, specifically the compression side. I already knew I was planning to do something with the suspension. All bikes are undersprung for me at my weight at 210 pounds, around 95 kilograms or somewhere in that range. So I already knew I was gonna have to do something at a minimum. The springs, I didn't really find it to be a problem. The suspension was performing well. I didn't notice an issue with that. And even after I had them revalved, the shims didn't look that bad. I know others have had other issues. So those 2 things, not an issue for me. So anyway, if you have avoided buying this bike because of issues that I've talked about or others, let me know that in the comments below. I'm curious to know what's holding you back. And if you have this bike and you have found some issues of your own that you find irritating or things that you hate, also leave that in the comments below. Now, if you made it to the end, I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Remember, you can always make more money, but you cannot make more time. So get out and do that ride that you've been thinking about, like out here in the Southwest desert where it is incredibly hot. And thanks for watching. Get out, do some riding, ride safe, and I will see you out there.